Sonia Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan travels to Russia in first foreign visit since the June 7 elections. Business tycoon and opposition leader Gagik Tsarukyan arrested in sweeping fraud investigation. And Armenia and Iran move closer to a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan traveled to Russia this week for the first foreign visit since the June 7 parliamentary elections, where he met with Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin on the sidelines of the Inoprom Industrial Exhibition in Yekaterinburg. The meeting came against the backdrop of ongoing Russian trade restrictions on Armenian agricultural products and goods. Mishustin said Moscow hoped that the Armenian government would continue to develop bilateral relations in the spirit of friendship, good neighborliness, and mutual respect, while also emphasizing the importance of protecting the interests of Russian investors in Armenia. He stopped short of congratulating Pashinyan, however, for his victory in the elections, and by the way, Russian officials haven't congratulated. Pashinyan described the talks as an opportunity to review the full agenda of bilateral relations and, in his words, set the clocks right following the elections. He acknowledged that problematic issues had emerged in recent months, expressed hope they could be resolved, and reaffirmed Armenia's commitment to developing ties with Russia and remaining a member of the Eurasian Economic Union. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, Pashinyan described the discussion as open, sincere, and friendly, saying the two sides had reached a number of agreements, though he declined to provide details until they had been implemented.
The European Union has donated the first of two remote-controlled demining machines to Armenia. The equipment was delivered to Armenia's National Civilian Operator for Humanitarian Demining. The machine, which weighs about 20 tons, is designed to withstand powerful mine blasts and to work in mountainous terrain. The delivery is part of a broader EU support package for Armenia's resilience. In December of last year, Armenia and the EU signed a bilateral partnership agenda document under which the EU pledged 15 million euros to support peace building and resilience, including funding for demining, training, and equipment. A second remote-controlled demining machine and two specially equipped ambulances are expected to follow this coming autumn. Officials said the machine will be used both for clearing land contaminated by mines and unexploded ordnance, and from 2027 for work related to the delimitation of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. According to official estimates, about 43 million square meters of land across 5 Armenian regions remain contaminated by mines. These are mostly agricultural or pastures, with infrastructure also affected. And also, Rubina, the European Union intends to build 3 border crossing points in Armenia, with demining of the relevant territory set as the first precondition for the work to proceed, according to EU's ambassador to Armenia, Vasilis Maragos.
And speaking of demarcation, there's no news, but Azerbaijan says work is continuing on the US-backed TRIP initiative, with Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov stating that the project is now at the document preparation phase. Speaking to reporters, Bayramov said Azerbaijan is being kept informed by its US partners because the planned entry and exit points are located on Azerbaijani territory. He added that Washington has assured Baku the process is moving forward. On the peace process, Bayramov repeated Azerbaijan's long-standing demand that Armenia amend its constitution to remove what Baku describes as territorial claims against Azerbaijan before a peace agreement can be signed. And turning to border delimitation, Bayramov said the process would continue from north to south and would also address the issue of the enclave and exclave villages. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, meanwhile, said there were no significant new developments in the delimitation process, noting that any progress would be announced publicly. He said there are 2 possible approaches to resolving the enclave issue: leaving the territories under the de jure sovereignty of the states to which they legally belong, or negotiating a territorial exchange of equivalent land, a mechanism already provided for under Armenian law. Pashinyan also pointed out that Azerbaijani maps, passports, and currency depict Artsakhan as territory outside Azerbaijan's control, arguing that Armenia should adopt the same precise approach in representing the status of Azerbaijani enclaves on its own official maps.
Businessman and opposition leader Gagik Tsarukyan was arrested this week following coordinated raids on his home and businesses and has been ordered held in pretrial detention for 2 months. Armenia's investigative committee alleges that between 2022 and 2024, Tsarukyan led a criminal group that used companies linked to Iran-Armenia trade to commit large-scale fraud, money laundering, and customs evasion, misappropriating goods worth an estimated $21 million. Authorities searched more than 70 locations and seized documents, vehicles, and other evidence. The operation also targeted companies within Tsarukyan's multi-group conglomerate, temporarily halting operations in several businesses, including the Ararat cement plant, which later resumed production. Tsarukyan's supporters dismissed the case as politically motivated, accusing Prime Minister Pashinyan of orchestrating the prosecution. Pashinyan rejected these claims, saying the investigation is part of a broader effort to dismantle what he described as entrenched networks of corruption and pledged to continue pursuing accountability. Now, separately, the Prosecutor General's office has asked the Anti-Corruption Court to invalidate a number of contracts and property rights linked to Tsarukyan and his multi-group concerning land on the shores of Lake Sevan. Meanwhile, a group identifying itself as Iranian businessmen said the investigation stems from a complaint they filed back in 2023 alleging fraud, smuggling, and money laundering. The raids also sparked criticism from a coalition of Armenian human rights organizations which condemned what they described as the disproportionate use of force during Tsarukyan's arrest and questioned the publication of video footage from that operation. It was he wasn't resisting arrest, and he was surrounded by I'm assuming NSS officers, and then pushed to the ground. It was almost too much. And anyway, during the search, authorities removed several wild animals from Tsarukyan's private zoo. One elderly lion died after being sedated for transport, and the investigative committee has opened an inquiry into its death. And also a crocodile or an alligator that was removed from his private zoo attacked one of the workers who
was removing the animals and the carcasses of the animals he had in that carcass.
The taxidermy. Yeah. I mean, those photos were because of Sophia, if she's listening, Bergman, who longtime interned for us years ago and also, of course, writes for us, who was in Yerevan and took the gig to, I think she got the last photos of that crazy.
Yes. She even changed her ticket so that she could go and
thing
photograph.
She did.
Yes. So those photos that are, circulating now from the before Tsarukyan in his hall, medieval hall, are from Sophia's
photos.
Well, and Iran and Armenia are moving closer to signing a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement, according to Iran's ambassador to Armenia. Speaking at a press conference, the ambassador said the agreement is currently being finalized and is expected to be signed during Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's upcoming visit to Tehran. He said the partnership will establish a new framework for bilateral cooperation, including in security and defense. On the proposed trip corridor, the ambassador said Armenia has assured Iran that the project and any U.S. involvement will not threaten Iranian interests. At the same time, he said mechanisms are needed to ensure regional transport links can be expanded while addressing Tehran's security concerns. Separately, Pashinyan said trip would create a rail connection linking the Persian Gulf to the Black Sea, significantly expanding trade opportunities between Armenia and Iran. He argued the project is in Iran's interests and described TRIP as a global initiative that Armenia hopes to develop in cooperation with Iran, Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the European Union, also Central Asian countries and China. Well, Iran's ambassador to Armenia also said Iran hopes Armenia will eventually develop an oil refinery capable of processing Iranian crude, calling it another area with significant potential for bilateral economic cooperation. Asked about opposition leader Gagik Tsarukyan, the ambassador stressed that Iran does not interfere in Armenia's internal affairs. He did, however, reveal that he had personally spent considerable time trying to mediate a commercial dispute between Tsarukyan and an Iranian business partner over a trade center established to promote Iranian exports to Armenia. He said the project ultimately collapsed despite Iran's efforts to facilitate a resolution.
And Armenia's constitutional court, as we all know, has upheld the results of the June 7 parliamentary elections, rejecting appeals filed by 7 political forces and confirming the Central Election Commission's certification of the vote. The ruling is final and cannot be appealed. The opposition alliances that challenged the results sharply criticized the decision. Strong Armenia said the ruling demonstrated the absence of genuine constitutional justice, while Armenia Alliance argued it failed to address what it described as electoral fraud and questions surrounding the new government's legitimacy. Despite their objections, both alliances announced they will take up their seats in the new parliament. Armenia Alliance said parliamentary representation would provide another platform to oppose the government, while Strong Armenia said meaningful political change requires both parliamentary engagement and pressure from outside the legislature. Separately, Strong Armenia announced that more than 100 candidates who did not win seats had withdrawn their what's called a registration, right, when they registered to be on the list, saying the move would allow them to focus on building the party while reducing the risk of potential political pressure against members without parliamentary immunity.
And Araknaz Manukyan, a former parliament member and member of the Mair Hayastan party's governing board, has been ordered held in pretrial detention for 2 months on charges of disclosing state secrets. Manukyan's arrest is linked to the criminal case against Mair Hayastan leader Andanik Tevanyan, who was arrested in May on charges of state treason and espionage. According to the investigative committee, Tevanyan was recruited by a foreign intelligence service in 2024 and received $622,000 in exchange for transferring classified information from a closed parliamentary session held in April of 2024. Tevanyan denies all allegations.
And Armenia's anti-corruption court has ordered the confiscation of assets belonging to former President Serge Sarkisyan and individuals affiliated with him. This was announced by the Prosecutor General's office. The ruling transfers to the state assets valued at approximately $1.7 million, including cash, bank deposit interest, shares in real estate, and a parking space, on the grounds that they were illegally acquired. Sarkisyan's lawyer dismissed the case as illegal and artificial and said the decision, which also concerns his daughters, would be challenged. And as always, not a lot of news this week, so we were quite brief and quick with it, but take a look at what we've published this week. And today we just published a piece by Talim Papazyan. She's a political scientist from Paris, actually, and who has written for us before. It's called After Defeat, Lessons from Marc Bloch. And he was a French historian, a resistance fighter, and he had written a very searing account of France's defeat to Nazi Germany in 1940. And so she draws some parallels and reveals, what lessons can we learn from that. And she was a very interesting, I didn't think it would be, to be honest, but it was a very interesting and enlightening read for me. Yeah.
And his book has been translated to Armenian. So on the occasion, I had a conversation with Tallinn, and the book is going around the office right now, like everyone's waiting for their turn to read. Well, another fascinating story we published this week, just yesterday actually, it's called Armenia's Wildlife Exports and an Indian Billionaire's Golden Cages, an investigation into the transfer of endangered animals from Armenia to India's controversial Vantara Wildlife Center reveals troubling questions about transparency, conservation, international wildlife trade, and Armenia's role in a global network that blurs the line between rescue and commerce. It's by the same author, by Mariam Tashan, who had just also recently
published about wildlife trafficking.
And how Armenia is like this little corridor.
Yeah, only for bad things. But yes, she's done an amazing investigation.
Oh, and both articles are available both in English and Armenian.
And we published a piece by Christopher Atamian called Carol Pelikyan, Inscribing the Female Body into Contemporary Art. Again, this was another piece, we have so many artists and creatives that we don't know about or haven't heard about. But, through painting, sculpture, and installation, Armenian-American artist Carol Pelikyan transforms the female body into a site of memory, identity, and resilience. And so Chris explores her career that's been shaped by feminism, her heritage, and an enduring fascination with the mysteries of human existence. That was also
I find Christopher's column very inspiring because, it's one thing to learn about Armenian artists, but it's also another thing to absolutely be inspired by them because they're like so fascinating, each one, and to understand that there's such talent out there and how,
And we need to celebrate it.
another article called Stewards of Armenian Cultural Heritage by Sandra Sadek. It's about the Armenian Cultural Heritage Institute that is racing to digitally preserve the country's endangered cultural legacy using cutting-edge technology. Its team is creating a permanent open access archive of Armenian monuments, safeguarding history threatened by war, revisionism, neglect, and the passage of time. It's interesting, their website, there's like all this 3D renditions of
fascinating work.
monasteries and other monuments.
And Sheila Palin's monthly column, this time it's called Progress Interrupted. And again, it's, typical Sheila, is very personal. She reflects on, the hard, often unflattering work of trying to become better. And she looks at relapse, discipline, and self-forgiveness and argues that progress is not erased by the moments we fall, but revealed in how we rise again.
And last but not least, Maria,
State of Play.
Yes.
State of Play. So it was a fascinating discussion because it was based off of an article he wrote for Statecraft and Governance about the burden of ruling and the anti-incumbent base that we had during the election. So again, it was a comparison with the 2021 parliamentary elections. And we talked, are Armenian voters becoming more sophisticated? And all the trends point to that, which is very, very inspiring. Whether civil contract has evolved into a durable political party, what the election says about the opposition. We talked about the youth vote, the gender divide, the urban-rural divide, and sort of the future of electoral competition. So kind of looking at things with the glass half full, I think, is something that we all need. So that was an interesting conversation that's up on YouTube and our website. And that's the kind of week it's been here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll be back again next week.